for your information, in case you don't know the program, we'll have another Facebook panel tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Very interesting topic too. It will be about mobile growth. So I don't know what are your plans tonight, guys, but don't go out too late if you want to be there like tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. So I will spend a few minutes here to explain you what we will have this afternoon. The social business track, this is the 3rd edition. We started last year in Paris. We did it again in London. We had great feedback from you. And I created, like with Loic this year, I created this program. In case you want to suggest new speakers, new topics for this specific program of LeWeb, please contact us, Cedric, C-E-D-R-I-C, @leweb.co. I'm really eager to learn from you what you would like to have on stage to make this specific program. We have very, very interesting brands this afternoon. The main objective of this track was to invite for the first time, I mean for the 3rd time now, invite brands to talk at LeWeb. So we have Intel, we have Dunkin' Donuts, we have Danone, we have Renault, we have Lufthansa, and each time we have the people that do define the strategy on social media or globally on digital for the brands. We also invited some vendors to explain how they help brands or agencies, how they help big business to be active on social media or to integrate social inside the company. And we will start with some data. I mean, we're always interested when you look at social media to have some insights, some analytics. And so we will start with Global Web Index. It's a UK company that's the largest research study on how consumers use the internet. He will do a 15-20-minute presentation with data, with insights on key figures about brands and consumers' engagement on social media. And this is the founder of Global Web Index, Tom Smith, that will start this presentation now. Please help me welcome Tom Smith.
Thank you, Cedric. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Smith, and I am the founder of the Global Web Index. And we're here today to talk through some of the latest research on consumer adoption of social media, in particular exploring levels of engagement around the world. And we're going to give you, in the next 15 minutes, a quick kind of overview of the state of social media globally. And it really helps set the scene for the next 2 days of social business and social media presentations. So just in summary, we're going to explore the latest data, and some of this was released yesterday, so it's very current. So it gives you an absolute up-to-date view of what's going on online. We're going to establish current social media behavior in terms of which channels lead the way, which markets lead the way, and in particular, and we all know that social media is a big deal, that's why we're all here, but one thing our research has really helped to confirm is the real global opportunity of social media and social business. So we're going to explore how there's a very large shift moving from mature, developed internet markets into emerging, fast-growing markets. We're also going to touch on how local variation is really what drives how consumers use social media. So although you see the rise of global platforms like Facebook, Google+, Twitter, local variation in how they're used and adopted is absolutely key. So just to give you a bit more background on the research, the Global Web Index is the largest multi-market research project in the world. We survey around 120,000 people a year across 31 internet markets, and it provides the most detailed view of how and why people use the internet. We are actually exploring a representative sample of 16 to 65 internet users, and since we were founded in 2009, we've interviewed about 180,000 consumers. So it gives you a very detailed perspective of what's going on and how different markets adopt and use social media. Just to give you a context of how the data is used, we work with brands all over the world, but we work with some leading web brands to help size their audience across various markets, particularly look at cross-platform usage, so how Consumers are using platforms on mobile, PC and tablet in combination. And we help a number of big brands just to develop further and more detailed audience insights and to sketch out their multi-market social media strategies and frameworks. So to kickstart and go through some of the data, and there is quite a lot of data here on the slide, so we will share and publish this on SlideShare this afternoon for your benefit to go through another time. But first of all, and this data was collected as of yesterday, so this is extremely recent viewpoint of what's going on worldwide. We track around 40 behaviors across all aspects of internet usage, from video, content, to applications, services, and of course social. So here is a ranking of what consumers have done online in the past month. And we can see, and this is something we tracked since 2009, is the real dominance of video. It's always been the #1 form of behavior. But what's interesting for us and critical is the rise of social media behaviors and social networking in particular. So here we're looking at the top behaviors in the last month on a global basis, and we can see that social networking is bigger than webmail, e-commerce, it's bigger than messenger services. Interestingly, we can see that photos are the #1 form of content sharing for consumers. So, photos have grown massively over the last few years. It's become easier to share online, and it's a key element of our social interaction online. The other key form of content sharing online is product reviews. So we can see that product reviews online is almost as large as sharing photos, around 40% of consumers globally. And this just shows you the wider impact of social and consumer contribution in terms of impacting the purchase process and cycle. If we look at a set of more niche activities, so activities that are 30% less than on a monthly basis, we can see quite clearly how social media has evolved and how it's impacting the current landscape online. So what we can see at the top of this list are sort of more traditional forms of social media around commenting on stories, using forums and message boards, using Q&A services. But what's really interesting for us and how the social landscape is changing is that uploading video online is now nearly as large, around 24% of global internet users, as commenting on a story, posting on forums. So there's this definitive shift from sort of more traditional forms of contribution around text, writing, into more visual forms around video and photos, as we saw on the last slide. If we look at the bottom of that chart, we can see another key thing is how microblogging, which is of course Twitter, largely in most markets, is now a very substantial global social channel with around 20% of consumers, internet users, using on a monthly basis. More traditional and heavy forms of content creation, like creating websites, blogs, or news stories, ranks around 15% on a global basis. So we can see this definitive shift to more real-time, quicker, more visual forms of content sharing. If we consider and look at how this works across multiple devices, and I think this is particularly relevant as we're talking about connected devices and the Internet of Things, there's a real transition for social usage and behavior onto different platforms. So actually, mobile users are more likely to use a social network through a mobile than a traditional PC user. And this transcends that mobile users are more likely to upload photos than a traditional PC user. And what's really interesting is how mobile and tablet users are more likely to upload and share video and more likely to microblog. So we can see how the new forms of growing social media are really transcending across all devices, and you can see how social is integrated into this new ecosystem. Okay, what we're going to do now is explore across a wide range of social behaviors and help to understand how markets differentiate in terms of their adoption. And this is a process that we apply to our clients. So we're going to adopt and look at 12 different types of social engagement. We have 4 across participation metrics, which include using social networks, using microblogs, posting on a forum, and commenting on a story. We also have 4 metrics around creation, which look at uploading photos, uploading video, writing a blog or writing a story or news story elsewhere. and 4 metrics in terms of interacting with brands. So we've got liking products or brands, reviewing products or brands, retweeting, and uploading video or photos to branded page. So we take a combination of those metrics to create 2 key measures that we're going to explore now. One is a social engagement score, which I'll explain as we go through, and the second one is sizing the social market. And this allows us to assess, the more global impact of social media. So we're going to look at first, across a selection of the markets that we survey in our research, is the level of aggregate social media behavior. So this first figure is for people, the percentage that are involved in not a single one of those activities. So what's really interesting is that in most markets, around 80% of consumers, so 80% of internet users are actively using some form of social media across one or more channels. The only exception to this is Japan, where around 50% of consumers are doing nothing in social media. And this is where there's quite a number of kind of local cultural factors that have slowed mass market social media adoption. As we move on, what's really fascinating is the markets where there is extremely heavy engagement in social media. So if we look at China, Indonesia, Philippines, Argentina, around 90% plus consumers are involved and using social media. What's really staggering is, if we look at China, nearly 50% of all internet users are involved in 6 or more activities on a monthly basis. So we can see how ingrained social media is in their usage patterns. And this kind of clear pattern with emerging fast-growing markets dominating social media usage and engagement is something that carries through our research and all the data we see in terms of adoption and usage across the world. Now, what we're doing here is converting that into size. So if we look at how many physical users are engaged in social media, we can clearly see how we're moving beyond the traditional, mature, emerging market kind of mix. So what we're looking at here is internet users who are using 3 or more social media activities on a monthly basis. So we can see at the top the absolute dominance of China, and we're increasingly moving to 2 internets. One is China, and the other one's the rest of the world. And next on the list is the US, which obviously is traditionally seen as the home of social media, social platforms. But what's really interesting is we move down the list. India, Brazil, Russia, Indonesia, Turkey all have larger social universe sizes than Germany, UK, Japan, Italy, and basically all the traditional markets that are mature online, and we would traditionally put investment in first. So we work with a large number of clients who, when they're setting, where they invest their budgets, how they set up their organizations and structures in social media and social business, and one of their key facts for investment would be, what's the internet penetration in that market? How developed is it? How many people are online? But when we look in terms of through engagement and how many socially engaged consumers there are, we can see a totally different view. We've got a whole new set of markets to consider. When we look at the growth trends, we can see this is even more pronounced. There's a clear shift from developed, mature internet markets into a whole set of emerging and fast-growing internet markets. So what we're doing here is we're looking at the growth of socially engaged consumers from this time last year to Q2 2012. And in just 1 year, the size of the universe in India grew nearly double, about 95%. And this is replicated across all the fast growth internet markets. So India, Argentina, Indonesia, South Africa all lead the way in terms of growth. We also see at the bottom of the scale a slight maturing and saturating in certain developed markets like US, a little bit like France, where we see some decline in the terms of adoption of social media, but also aggregation of behavior into single platforms like Facebook. So this is clear demonstration of the shift and the growing opportunity outside traditional internet markets. Now we're going to summarize that in the following graphic, and this takes a little bit to understand, but on the bottom axis, on the 100 mark is basically highly engaged in social media. And at the other end is basically a very light engagement. So what we're doing is looking at, on that axis, we're looking at how engaged markets are in terms of social media. On the other axis, we're taking the universe size and looking at how much reach does social media deliver against the total population. And this is a really interesting way of looking at markets, because we start to see how different the picture is in just these 30 markets. We see how different the picture is in every single market. On the far left-hand side, you've got Japan that has very low engagement and low reach of social media in the population. On the right, you have a set of markets that have very high engagement, but not necessarily a high reach in the market. But the key kind of finding from this, and the finding that we've applied to our clients, is basically, if you want to consider where to develop and invest your social infrastructure, business, communications, most markets are absolutely relevant. You know, there's as many people engaged in Turkey as there is in Italy, France, US in terms of penetration. It's a huge opportunity for global multi-market brands. And if we lay this matrix over the top, it becomes a bit easier to understand. So we can see high reach, high engagement markets in the top right, high reach, low engagement in the top left, and low reach, low engagement, which is pretty much only Japan. So we can start to visualize how markets map out and where we should prioritize. One key other short theme we want to cover before we wrap up today's global overview is how much variance there is in terms of adoption in local markets. So, you know, we've heard from the guys from Facebook before, and we know how global Facebook is, and our data backs it up. So in 25 out of the 31 markets, active usage of Facebook stands around 40% plus of that internet population. In certain markets, it climbs to as high as 80% of internet users. In markets like Indonesia, Philippines, South Africa. Again, these fast growth, highly engaged, emerging markets. But what this really shows is, and the interesting thing that comes out of our data is, despite the growth of these global platforms, there isn't a growth of standardized behavior. Everybody's different in every single market. And this is really clearly demonstrated. This is just one example, but when we look at the number of consumers that have liked a brand and look at it by market, the global average for doing that in the past month is 57%. But we can see the huge variation in just that behavior on Facebook, right from the Philippines, where it stands around 87% of internet users, right down to South Korea, Germany, and China, where Facebook's somewhat of a secondary platform. And in their engagement and brand engagement and liking brands is extremely low. So this simple example, you know, demonstrates how much variation there is in usage and how key it is to understand every single market in terms of how they're using social media. So in terms of the key learnings that we've gathered while running this research project, and we can hopefully share in short with you today, is, you know, social is driving a change in the way that the internet is growing. Every single consumer that comes online in fast growth markets, the first thing they do is create a profile on a social network. First thing they do is use social media. In many mature markets, you know, behavior is more around traditional forms of, whether it be e-commerce, applications, services. So we see this definitive shift and much higher levels of social engagement in these fast growth markets. And it's very clear from our data and everybody else's data that, you know, when we approach multi-market social media or social business, you know, we can globalize some elements and put structures in place, but the local behavior and variation is key, and it's really important to understand local markets. And what we haven't talked about today is how different demographics and target audiences are. So what we've seen from our research is that every single group approaches social media differently. So you may get a segment that is young, they're connected, but the way that they approach, and depending on their attitudes and outlook on life, will completely reflect in terms of how they adopt and use social media. So in short, there's a huge global opportunity out there, and social media is growing and driving the internet, but it does need more strategy and understanding to execute on a multi-market basis. And that's our overview for today. If you want to look at the slides and see the data in the slides, we will be sharing those online this afternoon. So I'll be around if you have any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Let's have a quick chat, like doing 3 minutes, because I was really excited about the data you've just presented. And thank you for sharing them and sharing them online after the conference. I know, I'm sure it will be like a great success on SlideShare. But I have one question for you, because in this audience you have brands, you have like executives, but you also have startups. So data is good, but how to use them? We can sometimes when we see that amount of data, we don't know what to do with it. So you gave some key learnings at the end. What's your main advice?
Yeah, I mean, there is a general explosion of data from various sources. And sometimes when we start working with new clients, they say, I don't need more data. But actually what our data helps do is, because it's research-driven, it's not analytics or listening, or it's very targeted on specific consumers, so it actually helps simplify the story. But I think our key learning is before, when building strategy, organization, is to really do the insight work first and really understand your target audience and market, because as we execute in social media, it becomes more, we're going to invest more, in organization, and it's important that we get it right and tailor it to our specific customer, brand user, target market. So it's very important not just to dive in, but to do that piece of work first and generate that understanding. And
so what's the most surprising thing you've seen in the last survey? Like, how long have you made all these surveys?
We started in 2009.
2009, okay.
Yeah, so we've been tracking for about 3 years. And actually, I mean, some of the stories that come out today are really, it's been constantly surprising how we see this continual growth in fast-growing markets, and how much appetite there is to use social media and social services, and how that we've seen a real shift just in 3 years from a kind of more US-centric internet to one that's far more global. And it's that disconnect between the services and the investment and the great web services we all use could generally originate out of the US or Europe or developed markets, but the appetite and usage is really there from, in emerging markets. So that's fascinating.
Last question for you. I'm not sure I've seen a lot of African countries in your data.
That is true. We are in South Africa.
South Africa, yeah, but like...
And we do have we're a long-term project, so we have a roadmap to launch in Egypt and some other markets in North Africa. There are some logistical challenges to collecting market research data in certain markets. So we have client demand and interest to launch in Nigeria, for example, but there are many technical challenges to doing that because we survey 4 times a year moving forward. Yeah. So you have to make sure you can do it right, basically.
Thank you again, Tom. Thank you for your answers and for all this data. Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.